everyone, this is Sarah from Crafting and Relaxing, and this video is a little different. I'm going to try not to be distracted by products and just meander through crafting, but to stay on track and give a tutorial for beginning heat embossers. The first thing I want to go through is the supplies that you need to do this. So I'll talk about the required ones and then the optional ones. So the first thing you need is an embossing heat tool, and it should say embossing tool or embossing heat tool. There are also some craft tools. They look like little black hair dryers. Those are a little bit different, and they're for bringing out the color in mixed media, so be sure it's for embossing. A stamp of your choice, any stamp, a picture, text, whatever. A Versamark pad or some other pigment wet ink. Now I will say, if I was buying my supplies for the first time, I would absolutely get a Versamark pad. I can show you some watermarks and great things this does in another video. If you'd like to see that, just let me know. But I do love this pad, but the thing that I would buy is Distress Oxide inks. The newest inks that Tim Holtz came out with. The oxides, be sure you get the Distress Oxide inks. Those are great for a variety of things, so you can use them for embossing and other things. But Versamark or any pigment ink will work. Let me show you some others that would work. This is a color box, and as long as it says pigment stamp pad, you can also read on the back and see if it says it would work for embossing. The trick is it can't be a basic dye ink pad that dries super fast. And you'll notice when you open these up, they look different. The dye ink pads have the hard pad and they're very thin inks. These have a foamy pad and they're sticky. And the Distress Oxides are somewhere between a combo of these products that doesn't seem possible, but that's a different story. That's for a different day. Okay, so you have your heat embossing tool, a stamp, your ink, and then you need a powder. I don't think it necessarily matters what brand you get, but when I talk about inks for embossing or embossing powders, that's not something I would buy used online. It's not something I would get in the clearance bin at a weird craft store. I would go with a brand that you've heard of. So either one of the major ink brands or Stampin' Up! Or something made by Ranger or Tim Holtz, you'd be fine. Okay? But they do get old. You might see in some of these videos, mine are a little chunky. So that's not something where I would just try a discount. Okay, then cardstock. Any cardstock will do. I don't use thin printed papers typically because I'm more likely to burn myself. And the paper can warp a little. So I think you're better off with a nice cardstock or whatever cardstock you have. Then the other thing that is not optional, but it doesn't matter how you do it, you either need a piece of paper or a container. You'll see that some people, if they have a big jar of embossing powder, they've taken the whole jar and poured it in there, and then they'll use a spoon and they'll hold their paper over it and spoon it onto it. I just, you'll see in my demos, use a piece of paper and I write on the piece of paper the color that I'm going to use with it. Here's another one, clear, so that when they're sitting around, if I'm working with a bunch of powders that night, I'm not mixing the colors, but do get in the habit of putting it in the cup. I'll show you that too. Okay, so those are the required things. I have a few optional items right here. A clothespin will come in handy because you'll see that I leave my pieces of paper pretty large. You might be working on a project one day and have a very small piece of paper and you're not going to want to hang on to it right here while you're embossing. It's hard on your thumb. A clothespin, a pair of tweezers, something like that would be good. Then this, I'll show it to you when I use it. Go ahead and open it up. It's called an embossing buddy. In this brand. I'm sure in other things it's called something slightly different. It's essentially powder and you rub it on the paper and then it keeps the embossing powder from sticking to the rest of the page. So let me show you an example. I'm not sure if you can see it. I didn't use it on this item and there are tiny little flecks of silver around the edge. You know, when you're using glitter and it doesn't always end up in the right place. So I don't use this item a lot. If I was making a wedding card or something really important, I would use it, and with high contrast, say black with gold embossing powder for an anniversary, something like that, where it's definitely going to show. But this, I didn't use it, and I wouldn't throw this away. Okay, then the last optional item I want to show you is embossing pens. They come with different ends, different brands. This one's a chisel end and a fine end. And these are designed for, you could take a colored, here's an example. You could take this and you could stamp it in regular ink, and then you could put some accents on some of the letters and put some silver powder on it. You could stamp a rose in pink, and then you could use this marker and hit the edges of the petals and then put gold embossing powder and heat it. So you could, instead of doing the entire area of an image, you could do specific parts. The other thing is you could doodle, you could write. If you have beautiful handwriting, you could just write your sentiment and then emboss it. That probably explains why I never used mine. I had 3 of them. 2 of them got too old and I threw them away, and then I still have this one. So if you think you would use it, great. I mean, the rose with the gold on the edges sounds really pretty, and yet I've never done it. Okay, so those are the supplies you need, and you don't need this exact ink pad or this exact embossing gun, but I think I've given you enough information. In fact, the embossing gun's so old, good luck with that. But I think I've given you enough information. And mine is, the brand is Marvy. I know Marvy makes some, and a couple others do. So you just try. I tried to find one that wasn't so big to store, and if in case I wanted to take it with me. I like to take my supplies places sometimes, but I never take my embossing gun anyway. So anyway, I think that's enough on the basic supplies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through 1, maybe 2 examples, and then I'll make other videos where I show you a lot of different colors and different options you could do with embossing. And I've already made one video where I used this ultimate metallic and a clear powder, and it turned out beautiful. And so I'll link to that. That one was assembling a card, butterflies, flowers, and bling. So it didn't even have embossing in the name, but it turned out super cute. One thing that I will say is, I think if I was just starting out for stamping, I would be very careful to shop around, ask my friends, that sort of thing, and get the right products from the get-go, because the prices aren't that different, and once you have it, you're not going to want to just throw it away and go buy the next best thing. So be careful that you don't necessarily buy the inks that I have just because you see them in the videos. These are the ones I have. If you sent me a box of Distress Oxide inks in the mail, I would be overjoyed, and you probably wouldn't see a lot of these inks anymore. So just keep that in mind. The other thing is, if you think that heat embossing is for you, I looked online, and Ranger has a kit that has a gun and some powders in it. So you could get a kit, and then you would just need your ink. I didn't see any kits that included ink, and that's probably not a great idea. Home Shopping Network had one that said it had a glue pad with it. That was probably their version of Versamark. And when it comes to Versamark, if this got broken or damaged tomorrow, I would go buy a new one. This isn't a product that I would be flexible on. It's like my Hermadots, also known as Hermafix. Like, some things you have a favorite and you stick with it. So just kind of keep that in mind, because I think sometimes as a crafter you see people using things and you think, oh, well, that's the best product. And these days, where we don't have specialized stores that you can go into, it's harder for you to ask. So ask your friends. You can send me an email, or you can write a comment, and I will be happy to help you too. I recently went to a scrapbooking store, the kind that I didn't even know existed anymore, where they had so much stuff I couldn't decide what to buy. The lady was lovely. I talked to her about stamp positioners, and she let me play with her Misty and talked all about it to me, and then showed me, and then talked to me about the Tim Holtz one and said she didn't have it in stock, but that's the one she thought that I should get. And there aren't a lot of places like that where you can go and learn about paper crafting anymore. So if you need help, I'll help you. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Versamark and I'm going to ink this stamp up. And this is the one I used from my fabulous Dollar Tree set. And it was in the coloring video, but I thought this would be a good stamp to use because you've seen it before. So you can kind of see how it looks in black embossing compared to the other way when it was just flat on a piece of paper. And the cardstock I'm using was just what was handy. It's not actually white, it's a little bit cream or pink. If you have a textured cardstock and it has a more smooth side and you're learning, I would use the smooth side. I'm going to use the smooth side because I'm trying to show you and do things properly the first time. So I'm going to take this powder thing and I'm going to rub it on here. You don't see it at all, but what it does is it makes it so that the embossing powder doesn't stick and doesn't change the ink at all. And then I'm going to put this right in the middle, I guess. I probably should have put it up a little higher so that I don't burn my fingers. Then I'm going to pull it off. And it's a little bit dirty. That's funny. Oh well. Okay, and I'm going to take my black powder, which won't matter one bit that it's dirty. And this thing is really full. I just broke the seal on it today. And I'm going to tap this down, and it doesn't matter how you do this. This container is so full that I'm using a lot, and you'll see that it's a little bit chunky. That's probably from age. You don't want it to be chunky. And then I'm going to tap it like this. Okay, so you can see that there's some around the edges a little bit. I do not want to hit it with the heat gun and have that on there, or I would definitely need to trim it. I also have some in some other places, so frequently it's a good idea to tap the back. Sometimes it doesn't matter. This one's a little messy. Okay, now, absolute, very important thing. Pick up your paper and put your powder back in the jar before you turn on the gun. If you forget and you work on top of it, you'll probably only make that mistake once. So you won't need me to remind you. Okay, wow, this is full. They should not have put that much in there because I'm not qualified to operate that. Okay, and then I always set these aside too, just so I'm not blowing. That one's still really messy because it was so full. I'm gonna wipe this off a little. Okay, then you want to turn on this heat gun and let it warm up a little. So it's going to be loud and annoying, but before I put it towards the paper, I'm going to let it warm up, okay? Because otherwise I'm just warping my paper and it's not actually hot enough to melt it. And I don't know how well you'll be able to see it in the video, but you know when it's done. The minute it turns shiny, you move on to another section so you don't burn it. And I hope you can see that it's getting darker and it's taking on a shine. I'm not sure why that corner hasn't yet. There we go. Okay. looks like it's all done. Okay, so hopefully you can see that it has a bit of shine and a bit of texture, and it's dry. Okay, and what I think you would notice is if you bought brand new powder and brand new ink, you would probably have a little more texture than I'm getting, because I have older ink pads, so maybe a little bit dried out. I'm trying to check to see if I should hit it again too, maybe. There we go. So I think you can see that in the video, has a little shine. The thing that embossing does that's kind of nice is then if you want to color, it pretty much forces you within the lines, okay? And I do have one that I did earlier in silver on this, and it is really hard to see on camera, so I don't know if it does you any good, but kind of love it. Kind of turned out pretty cute. And maybe I should have done it on a darker paper for more contrast. And then I have a thank you right here. I'm going to do one more just to show you a completely different example, because I know on camera it's kind of hard to see things. So I'm just going to pull the stamp off and set it off camera and not wash it for now. The world will not come to an end, I promise. And I'm going to use this new set that I have, Letter It from Ranger, and it's thank you and a bunch of really great words, and I'm peeling off a great big grateful. And I don't know if you've seen these sets, but this set was only $7, and if you look at it, it has thank you, thanks so much, which, I mean, compared to a lot of stamp sets, that's really good. Okay, so I don't think I've actually used this stamp yet, so it's a little tough to get off. And I believe these are made out of silicone, so they're a little more stretchy than some of the other clear stamps. Okay, there we go. And on this one, I'm going to use let's use this purple metallic. So typically in your embossing, you're using a silver or a gold, that kind of thing, but you can also use metallic inks like this one and a clear powder. I don't know how this is going to be on this purple, but I want to try it. Okay, so you just, on a large stamp, you want to leave the stamp down and take the pad to it so you know that it's gets good coverage. And on these clear stamps, you can see it pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to put that over there. I'm going to put the lid on it because I'm trying to be a good demonstrator, but let's be honest, I might not have done that if you weren't watching. Okay. So then I think on the silicone especially, you're supposed to just kind of let it sit there for a sec, but I get impatient. There we go. Oh, that's gorgeous. Okay, then take the clear powder. This bottle doesn't have very much in it. I'm not sure why I have multiple bottles of clear. And like I said, you can be dainty and be careful how much you get on there, but I'm going to put it all back in the jar, so it just doesn't matter. Okay, so this one, even though it's clear powder, it might help you see it better in the video because the color got covered up once I put the powder on it. So let's fire this thing up. So this one you can see it pretty well as it changes. And once that gun heats up, you just go right across the page. And when it goes from looking like sand to shining, then you move on. Okay, and you'll see that time I did it on the more textured side of the cardstock. And I think that's just another fun example of things you can do with it. You could also take ink and rub it. Well, I'll show you that in another video. There's all kinds of things that we can do in different videos if you have questions about it, if you want to see more color in them or different things. And I really like to emboss images and then color them in, because it helps contain, on something like this, it helps contain your coloring medium a little better if you're somebody like me who doesn't really like to color and gets outside the lines. There are some embossing examples, and we talked about the supplies, and I'll put the list of the items that you need to have down below in the description of the video. And if I get requests for more embossing videos and I make more of them, then I'll link to them down below. Okay, thank you so very much for your support of crafting and relaxing, and I hope that you're taking time in your life to relax and do something crafty and fun, whether it's paper crafts or whatever. And if you didn't see my video about shop hops for quilt shops, you might want to check that out, because that's ridiculous that they just give stuff away. Okay, thanks so much.